On April 23, 2025, after being on death row for over 20 years, Moises Sandoval Mendoza was put to death by lethal injection in Texas. His offenses were as heinous as they were wanton, leaving destruction in his wake. In this video, we will learn what went down that day, his last meal, and his last music words. For most, the tale starts on March 18, 2004, when a peaceful morning in Farmersville, Texas, became a nightmare. A young mother wasn't home, and her house appeared ransacked, as if someone was frantic to seek out something or somebody. And in the bedroom, her 5-month-old infant was heard crying by herself on a bed that had been flipped over. The woman was Rachelle Tolleson. She was only 20 years old and she was dead. But to figure out what actually transpired, we must go back to the evening of the day before, March 17. That evening, Rel had stopped by her mother's residence, then gone home with her baby about 10 p.m. It was an ordinary evening, but at some point between that time and dawn, everything altered. The following morning, Rel's mother stopped by to visit as she always did, but this morning, the back door was left open, and the house was a mess. The bed was pushed out of position, the headboard was knocked askew like someone had jumped into it, and a nightstand was pulled away from the wall. But the strange part was that Rel's purse was still there, and her vehicle was untouched. Her divorce papers were lying face down on the kitchen floor, smudged with a huge muddy boot print. And baby Avery, who was only 5 months old, was lying on the mattress by herself. But Rel was nowhere to be found. When the police showed up, they knew immediately something was wrong. This was not someone who just packed up and left, and before long, an all-out search was on. Dozens of neighbors on foot, on ATVs, even on horseback, combed the fields and roads near Farmersville. They kept searching for 5 straight days, but they turned up nothing. Then about 10 miles out of town, a man who was walking through the forest saw something in the ground. It was the appearance of a fire. He approached it and saw the charred body of a young woman. Later on, investigators verified the reality. It was Rachelle. Her body had been discarded in the middle of nowhere, burned and covered in a stack of logs. It was soon apparent what the murderer had attempted to accomplish: destroy everything. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing left behind. Detectives initially pointed towards Andrew, her planned husband. The breakup had been complicated, and it was Rel who initiated the proceedings. But Andrew informed them he had attended a party when she went missing. He explained that he'd drunk too much, had gotten a ride home, and never stepped out of his house again. His alibi appeared strong. Others at the party recalled he'd been there and recalled how intoxicated he'd been. But one detail stuck in their heads. There'd been a bonfire at that party, and wood had been used to burn Rel's body. It had all the characteristics of the mesquite wood from the same fire. Logs were tested, 8 from the scene and 3 from the bonfire Rel had attended on the night she died. Each had an identical odd chemical signature, identical combination of metals, identical odd level of titanium. That meant the logs all originated from the same region, perhaps even the same tree. It was a breakthrough. For the first time in forensic science, charred wood was a tangible piece of evidence. Initially, that directed suspicion directly to Andrew once more. He attended the party. He had access to the blaze. But when detectives began to investigate, witnesses came forward. They revealed something new to the police. Andrew did not bring the firewood. Someone else did. A 21-year-old named Moises Mendoza. Witnesses informed police that Rachel and Moises were acquainted from high school. Moises had shown interest in Rele after his breakup with Andrew, and they had exchanged a few words at the bonfire, but Rele had informed friends she wasn't interested in him. When he was first questioned by police, he had not denied knowing Rela. Indeed, he confessed to picking her up that evening, saying she had gone off willingly with him. But that would imply that she left behind her infant daughter alone in a pillaged home, something that no one thought possible. But the story got worse. The second time he was questioned, Moises reported that while they were riding in his truck, he strangled her until she lost consciousness. He then brought her to a field at the back of his residence, where Hully attacked her, choked her once more, and pulled her further into the field. That's where he strangulated her for the 3rd time, this time until she was no longer moving, and to ensure that she was indeed dead, he stabbed her in the neck. Initially, he left the body where it was, assuming no one would ever discover it. But as the cops closed in, panic took over, and suddenly he realized that he needed to stash the evidence before it was too late. So he put her in his car and drove far into rural Collin County, pulling over onto a deserted dirt pit far from any road or house. There, in the darkness of nowhere, he burned her. When the fire burned out, he'd hidden what was left under a pile of brush, assuming no one would ever discover her. But 6 days passed, and they did. Investigators had begun to dig into Moises' background, and what they found raised red flags. He had a history. Not long before, he'd attempted to kidnap several women in Dallas, and when Michelle disappeared, he was already out on bail. When they searched his house, it got worse. They discovered a pair of boots in his bedroom, caked with soot and saturated with the odor of gasoline. The tread was matched to the boot print on Relle's divorce papers by crime scene investigators, and a forensic analyst compared the wear patterns and scuffs along the back of the heel. It was an exact match. And then they discovered the jeans. They were covered with ash and dirt, but concealed in the cloth were small flecks of dried up blood. They dispatched it for analysis, and when the test results returned, there was no denying it was Michelle's blood. The case was growing rapidly. Physical evidence, DNA, the similar boot impression. Yet when they finally confronted Moises, he didn't respond. No denial, no apology, no feeling whatsoever. He sat there cold and quiet, like none of it had anything to do with him. Moises was arrested and charged with capital murder, and when it came time for trial, it wasn't about whether he did it since he had already confessed, but it was about whether he'd be sentenced to death. And it didn't take long before the jury decided on his fate. On July 1st, 2005, Texas law asked two fundamental questions of the jury. Was Moises a threat to society in the future? And were there any grounds that he must be spared? They agreed to the former and disagreed with the latter. Moises started life on death row, embarking on a legal fight that would go on for years. His lawyers argued that his defense team failed him, that they didn't dig deep enough into his past, that they missed signs of mental illness, trauma, or anything that might have changed the jury's mind. But all his appeals were denied. First in Texas, then at the federal level, the sentence stood. On April 23rd, 2025, after spending over 2 decades on death row, Moises was finally executed. He wasn't allowed to pick a final meal. Texas eliminated that feature in 2011 when 2 prisoners ordered an enormous feast and wouldn't eat it. Now they get the same meal as everyone else. Once he was strapped to the gurney, his spiritual advisor prayed over him for around 2 minutes. Then Moises spoke with the victim's family. He talked with each of them individually. Her parents, her 2 brothers, her cousin, and her uncle, all standing behind a window in the next room. "I am sorry for having deprived you of Relle's life," he said. He also stated that he had stolen Relle's daughter's mother from her, continuing, "I'm sorry for that. I know nothing I could ever say or do would ever make up for it. I want you to know that I am sincere. I apologize." Her daughter was not there, but his words were spoken to her anyway. Then turning to another window, he addressed his wife, sister, and 2 friends who sat observing. "I love you. I am with you. I am well and at peace," he stated. "You know that I'm well, and everything is love." At 6:21 p.m., the drugs started flowing. Moises let out 2 loud gasps, then began to snore. After about 10 snores, his body fell still. He was pronounced dead at 6:40 p.m. At 41 years old, Moises Sandoval Mendoza was dead.